Welcome to another Cup of Joe. I'm your host, Joe Tumalo, CEO of PG Partner. So happy to have back my guest, Casey Summar. Welcome back, Casey.
Welcome, Joe. Good to see you.
Oh, what's your coffee mug or tea mug?
Oh, yeah. So this was made by a friend of mine who's a potter in Alaska. So it always makes me smile when I see this big old honkin' mug.
You don't put that in the dishwasher, I'm sure.
Yeah, no doubt. Can't watch that.
Casey, thank you. The first Cup of Joe we did together was about charter registrations for consultants and people, those of us that provide services. That was great. And this one is from the charity standpoint, right? So my first question is, how does a charity know where to register? Like, what state do we need to be registered? Sure, there's a website. I forget that. Well, probably the charter registration website.
Well, so even that first question is so great, right? Because you would assume clearly there's some type of national registration or national repository, right? No, unfortunately not, right? So what we're dealing with is a patchwork of different state laws. And so we have 11 states that don't require any registration. You don't have to do a thing. But then the rest of them do typically require registration. And the requirements are going to be different for each and every one of them. So there are lots of different exceptions and exemptions, right? So in some states, if you're under a certain budget size, you don't have to register. Or in many states, if you're a church, you don't have to register. Some states, if you're a school, you're exempt, but you have to tell them you're a school, right? So like there's all this kind of nuance to who even has to register in the first place. And so there are some good online resources that will kind of let you know where, but really the most reliable is checking state by state, unfortunately. And so what we recommend is start with your home state, right? So whatever state you're primarily operating in, you've got boots on the ground in, your team is, start there, and you'll, if they have a registration requirement in your home state, then you'll most certainly need to register or at least seek one of these exemptions. And then from there, it starts to get more interesting and trying to determine when might you need to register elsewhere, right?
So, similar to the conversation we had on the other version of this, let's say, okay, we're based here in Pennsylvania and we have two donors in California. Now, this may be may not be a straight answer on this, but
Well,
we should
no,
I go through that?
such a good, such a good question. So I would say two donors, ever who are contributing from California, probably not enough to trigger that organization's requirement to register. But California is interesting because they say essentially, are you soliciting here? So my question would be, well, we've got two donors, but what kind of solicitation are we doing, right? So are we sending out mailers? Are we calling folks? Are we, do we have, are we hosting fundraising events in California? Those are all the type of things that I would say that combined with some contribution might now bring us to the threshold. But if what we're talking about are, let's say, it's a school in Pennsylvania, you've got alumni who now live in California, but, it's a personal reach out to them because of their pre-existing relationship with the organization here. No, right? I don't think that's enough to make an out-of-state university have to register. But, if they're sending those, donor requests to all of their alumni in the state of California, now we're probably, in registration territory. California is also interesting in that other things that can trigger the requirement are having, officers for the board in the state, for example, or having an employee there, doing any programming, hosting events there. So any kind of really activity that's happening in the state might also be enough to trigger registration. So we really kind of look at a host of factors in trying to determine where and when.
Okay. Now, this is a question maybe off the record. So, do we just ignore, say, look, we only have a couple of charities in whatever state, let's just wait and see if they come to us. And if they do, of course, we'll comply. But, we're
Yeah.
not going to spend all this time and money registering in what's 50 minus 11, 39 states. We'll just,
Right.
not that
Yeah.
we have donors in every state, but again, we have a couple dozen in this state in the Midwest. let's just wait and see if anybody notices. I mean, is that, I know you're an attorney, probably not a fair
Right.
question to ask an attorney, but what do you
No,
think?
these are, I often, tell clients, right, these are the tough risk assessments that organizations that, boards have to do. Sometimes I think I have the easy part of the job where I can tell you what the letter of the law is, right? I can tell you, that, Illinois says you must do this, and this, this state says you must do that. I can give you those parameters. But then I think the nuance comes to, given those requirements, given the reality of how many donors, how much solicitation is happening, given the realities of, our budget size and the cost of registration, all those pieces are what make the ultimate decision, right? Of do we register or not? And another piece of it too is, thinking about how, the enforcement, how active, different charity regulators are. Some are very aggressive. Some will, send communications to your home, right? Some of them can be really quite, individual officers and directors of charities will be getting notices at their home, right? So, in person, right? We could see some pretty, concerning enforcement activity. So a lot of it is thinking about the practicality of registration and weighed with, the risk of not. So, we put all those together. It is a common thing that our firm advises on. And I usually say, let's start by just getting an understanding of your solicitation activity and your donor base. Let's get that list of donors by state. And then let's start checking, right? Let's check off the low-hanging fruit of states that don't require registration. And then let's see where there's more activity. Let's evaluate how aggressive the regulator there is and how burdensome it would be to register. Because some now are online, it's really not so burdensome. Some it can be, a bigger production. And often it's not just registration, but annual reporting, right? So then it's making sure you're ready for the annual reporting. Another key factor, some states have pretty low audit thresholds. So Illinois is one of these, right? So I believe it's 350,000. So what that means, so if you're a charity that, let's say, has $1 million in annual revenues in California, well, in California, that would not trigger a requirement that you have independent audits of your financial statements. But if now you're doing activity in Illinois, you're registered there, maybe you do have to, and that's a significant expense. Audits are 25, 30,000 typically, right? So, it's not just the filing, right, with the state, it's sort of thinking about what does compliance look like and weighing that against the activity that's there and whether it's worth it. So yeah, it's a complicated question. Lots of pieces to analyze. Yeah.
Which is why you stay in business, right?
Right. Well, I can answer one quickly though, which is a question we get often of, we have a donate now button on our website, right? We have a button you can click. Is that enough to make us have to register nationwide? And I would say no, right? So we always say, no, that's not enough. Or just posting on social media, please contribute to our cause, when who knows might see it, on social media. That's the states, there is agreement that that's not enough. It's got to be more, right? So it's got to be some other type of solicitation targeting the state, or a lot of donation activity, or some other kind of presence. So that's helpful because, when we first got those donate now buttons on website, that was the big question. People didn't know. We thought, wow, if we put that on the website, is that alone going to require us to register nationwide, which, is not an inexpensive compliance proposition. So at least we have clarity on that piece. So one question that we can resolve with some clarity.
Last question I have is around charitable gift annuity registration. My assumption, totally different, right? No, not related at all, correct?
Typically not related at all. Exactly. Right. Yeah. So going to be a completely different process and requirements. So really what we're talking about is registration for the privilege, the right to solicit charitable contributions in the state, which, so then I always sort of think of it from that point of view. It's really almost like a consumer protection thinking. So if you think of it that way, you think about, well, what's kind of the public activity that we're engaged in? And that's what triggers this type of reporting and registration requirement.
With AI and everything changing, technology changing so rapidly, is the risk for donors raising? I guess AI, who knows where that's going to be in a couple of years, but people getting scammed, does that have any? connection with this?
It certainly is. And I don't know how much it's AI driven as much as it does make it much easier for people to send out very realistic and plausible looking solicitations. So, we are seeing charities that are, getting calls saying, yep, we just had a donor provide us with a solicitation that we did not send. And it sure looks like it's from us, so those kind of things, just the way we all see in our inboxes all day every day, right? The phishing, it's getting much more sophisticated. So yeah, exactly. And so I think that is what really does raise the importance and the value of, while the registration process, while all that can be burdensome, on the flip side, it is there to protect consumers. It is there to protect charities too, right? And from these kind of bad actors and people soliciting in their name. And unfortunately, that is a call we get pretty often. And so, it's I always remind myself, of that side of it when it does feel like, the regulatory compliance is high. It's high, but it's high for a reason.
Right. Casey, wonderful, incredibly helpful as always. When should people get in touch with you, and how could they get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, anytime there are questions about where the charity should be registered, we're always happy to look at that. Sometimes those are quick conversations. Sometimes it's more involved, and and then we're happy to help in both scenarios. We always direct people to our website as kind of the front door for the law firm. So the domain name for the law firm for nonprofits is www.lfnp, as in law firm nonprofit, lfnp.com. And we'd love to hear from you. And, we can work with charities all over the country. We do have presence in each time zone now. And, if it's not in our wheelhouse, we'll make sure to get you in the hands of the right person.
Wonderful. Casey, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, my pleasure.
Be well.